going to be doing some feathering with some of the knives that I brought out with me today. I guess I should just mention it briefly. This is my Deuter Freerider Pro 30 in case somebody asks. It's a great bag. This is my new Grey Wolf Knives Woodlore clone. This is 1/8. It's not the one that I have a video about previous. This is my Battle Mistress, the Anniversary Battle Mistress. I have my 1311 out here from Scrapyard. I've got my Deregulator from Scrapyard. I've got a Carpenter's Mora made by Baco, and I've got Bark River Bravo 1. I've got a Scrapyard dumpster mutt, and I've got a Spyderco Paramilitary 2 clone, and I've got a Case Sodbuster. I'm not sure. Let me think. I think this is, I want to say sycamore. I could be wrong. I forget what type of wood this is. Sort of rotten. I'm not sure how well it's going to feather, actually. I don't really have very good wood, actually, for this. I might have to redo it if this wood isn't going to really be sufficient. I'm not in a woodland right now where I have access to really great resources that would be good for feathering, but this stuff is good if it's not too far gone, and this one doesn't really appear that it is too far gone, at least not down towards this end. But then I've got some white poplar. These are both very soft woods, and they feather very easily, so it should be sort of a decent test of the feathering capability of the tools, just to showcase what they're capable of doing with like more ideal type woods. I would like to have a hardwood here as well, but I just don't have access to it in this part of the property. Let me see. I don't know how well this is going to work for feathering. May or may not. It's quite hard, actually, which is surprising to me. For this wood, I wouldn't expect it to be this hard. Yeah, this is really quite poor results. I mean, I'm getting some very good curls off of it, but it's not consistent. It's just this is one of the things where experience comes into the picture, because I feathered this wood a bunch before, and I know it's not supposed to be reacting this way. These feathers are very crumbly, and they are it's not producing the type of feather that I know it normally does. So if you've never feathered this wood before, this isn't something that you would know, but this is quite hard, this piece. It's a lot harder than this wood is, than I normally encounter this wood. It's harder than when I normally encounter it. So it's not impossible to feather, but I'm really not getting the type of results that I was looking for off of that piece. But, you know, I guess that is one of the, and maybe I should explain this knife a little bit more. This is the Scrapyard dumpster mutt. It happens to be a desert dumpster mutt. It is SR77 steel, which is Scrapyard's modified S7, and it is 0.275 inches thick. It is a high flat Saber grind with a secondary bevel. That's the way you should describe these bevels. This is a high Saber grind, but saying high Saber grind doesn't mean anything, because it could be a convex high Saber, a hollow high Saber, or a flat high Saber. So it really doesn't mean anything when people say a knife has a Saber grind. It could mean any number of different things. so that's insufficient. So especially when we're talking about the way these tools are feathering, we want to be very specific about the grind. So this is a flat grind, a flat Saber grind with a secondary bevel. So, and as far as this knife weighs 9 ounces as well, so fairly thick knife, not that heavy, but decently heavy, and weight forward because of the nature of the way the tang and the handle are designed. But so decently thick knife, flat Saber with a secondary bevel. Oh yeah, what I was going to say was that I'm not going to really get too much into the degree of these secondary bevels. This one is fairly axe-like, very thick. A lot of people would call it obtuse. A lot of people would complain about its cutting performance, and yet it's producing a 10 or 12 curl feather on a very regular basis, you know, even in less than ideal wood. So very capable slicing tool, even with what a lot of people would consider a very obtuse angle on this secondary bevel. So that's, I'm not really going to talk too much about that, and I honestly don't really know what angle this is. I do know just by looking at it that it's very obtuse, and I can guarantee that this is the type of thing that people complain about when they say, oh, I got a Bussikin knife or something like that, and it had a very obtuse angle, and I was forced to thin it down or whatever because it simply wouldn't perform well. Depends on what you're doing with it, but they'll feather wood like this, no problem. Okay, here we have another example of what I was talking about. This is also a Saber grind, but these two are very, very different. So I could call them both Saber grinds, and it would be really quite inappropriate, especially for what we're talking about here. This is a convex Saber grind, so it's a Saber grind with a convex bevel below the Saber, and it has no secondary edge. It's convex, so the edge is convex, and it just you know, terminates from the Saber. You know, it's one continual bevel to the edge, and so yeah, calling these Saber grinds would technically be correct. They are both Saber grinds, but they're very different. This is Bark River Bravo 1. It's rampless with a spear point. It's an A2 tool steel, and we talked about the grind, so we'll see how this does. This wood is not really performing very well for me, but yeah, not horrible. Not horrible. Maybe we're feathering away some of the surface, some of the crumbly nature of this surface wood here. Yeah. Capable. Good tool. Oh, yeah, this is 0.217. It's basically 7/32 of an inch thick as well. I'm not sure how much this weighs. These knives are fairly small. Even though they're very thick, both of these knives, they're fairly small. Like if you were to have a Becker BK2 in here with these knives, the BK2 is a much wider, bigger knife in both handle and blade width. So even though this thing's thicker than a BK2, it's not very wide or big. It's shorter and a lot less wide in both handle and blade than something like a BK2. So both these knives weigh a lot less than the 1 pound that the Becker 2 weighs. Okay, so we'll do a Scandi Grind now. This is a Baco Carpenter's Mora. It's sub 1/8 inch. It's like 3/32 or something like that. It's a really quite a short Scandi bevel. I guess this side of the bevel is a little bit higher than this one is. This is really like less than 1/4 inch of a Scandi bevel on this side of the tool here. I mean, you can look at it in comparison to this. That is like literally like a 7/32 height bevel on that side of the tool there. That's probably just a grinding error. It's a little bit higher on this side, a little bit, but this is not a very high Scandi bevel, but it's very thin in the height of the bevel. Like on this tool, this is about a 1/4 inch bevel on this tool, and it's the only thing that I don't really like about this knife. This is again a classic wolf lore made by Aaron Gray from Gray Wolf Knives, and it's 1/8 inch, and my other one that I have from him is 5/32, and that one has a higher bevel, because with the Scandis the bevel height is related to the stock thickness because of the angles. But anyway, we'll see how these feather. Scandi Grinds are really not my favorite for feathering. They work fairly well if you keep it out towards the tip on a tip-up configuration like this, like I've seen Morskahansky doing and stuff like that. But that's not my preferred feathering configuration, is to be doing tip-up. But I mean, it'll work. Obviously, if you can adjust your technique to the tool that you're using. There's nothing really wrong with that. It's probably the best thing to do. Why would you use a technique that you prefer using or you're used to using if it's not working with the tool you're using? So really nothing wrong with that. Fairly adequate. I find it a little bit more awkward on my wrist to be doing it like that. This is my preferred feathering configuration, is a tip down here. And I guess I'll just mention briefly that the way I do feathers is to always put them on top of each other in a single direction. So if I'm doing tip down, I'll do tip down, and I'll put my feathers on top of each other. In this direction, making a denser curl than if I was to try and do, what some people recommend doing, doing some tip up, one straight down, and then kicking one off to the side, curling one down the middle, kicking some off to this side, coming back over here, kicking some off to this side, curl a few down the middle, and then come over here. It's not, first of all, that is very difficult on your wrist to do that. Second of all, it's unnecessary because it shouldn't take you very long to be carving a small group of feathers that you can drop a spark into, and you don't need to do that. You don't need supposedly a big a feather stick that is dense in the way that it has feathers from here all the way over here, and you've carved a bunch out this way, and you've got a whole big section of feathers over here. It depends on what you're doing with your feathers. Mainly what I'm talking about here is the production of fine feather sticks that will light with a firesteel, and my preference is to develop the knife skill so that you can light them with a single strike of a firesteel rather than wasting the resource that is your firesteel and striking it several times when if you were simply carving the material finer, you wouldn't need to strike it that many times. So it's obvious that that's proper technique that will come with experience. You want to be striking your firesteel as little as possible. That that's just obvious. Okay. So yeah, these grinds, they work good. Maybe it's my experience level with Scandi Grinds more than anything else that I wouldn't really claim that Scandi Grinds are less capable of feathering than say like a flat grind with a secondary bevel, but I think it's easier for me to feather with flat grinds. But oh, I knew I had another knife out here. I do. I have a Swamp Rat Vex out here. It's up in my top compartment. I forgot about it. I have a Swamp Rat Vex combat grade, the newer model, because there's a couple of these. This is like the newer one that they came out with in like 2013 or whatever, and I drilled the scales off it because it was really handle heavy with even the micarta scales that Swamp Rat gave me. Just super duper handle heavy. It's not it wasn't something I enjoyed using, so I drilled the handle off of it and wrapped it, and I like it now a lot. It's great. So decent. This tool is 3/16 of an inch thick. It is a full height flat grind with a secondary bevel on it. So that's what this tool is. It's got like a 4-inch blade somewhere around there. So here, let's do something with the 1311. I haven't feathered with this tool in a long time. I'm actually not really sure how sharp this tool is. This is a different piece of this wood. Maybe, shitty, basically, this wood sucks it. Not bad, actually, because this tool isn't that sharp. Quite good, actually. This is always a good feathering tool. Okay, we'll do the Scrapyard Deregulator. This is, oh, I didn't talk about the grind on the 1311. 1311 is 13.5-inch blade. It is a flat Saber grind with a secondary bevel. 3/16 of an inch thick. Really, really great tool. Probably like my favorite knife that I own. It's such an amazing tool, that 1311. I can do pretty much anything with that tool. Really fond of it. This is a Scrapyard Deregulator. It has a 7 3/4-inch blade, I think. It's 5/16 of an inch thick. It's a very high Saber grind, a very high flat Saber with a secondary bevel on it. This is not really not ideal wood for this, actually, so I think these knives deserve even a little bit extra credit for feathering this wood as good as they are, because this wood is not cooperating very well, and that's just something you learn from experience. I can just tell. It's a feel thing. The way this all works out is you're feeling the edge along the wood, and it's about edge control and your ability to consistently do that. And that's one of the reasons that I don't like certain techniques that people try and use for feathering, where you might hold the knife stationary against, like, lock the knife up against your knee and pull the wood back or something like that. That is not going to teach you edge control. You're not going to learn the feel of the way the knife rides against the wood. You're not going to feel that, and that feel is very different on this piece than what I'm normally used to on this species. This wood is, I guess, it's cured very hard, and it's just a feel thing. I can just tell that it's not cooperating really very well for feathering. If I had access, if I was in a different part of the property and I had access to other wood, I would not be even messing around with this, because if I was in a different part of the property and I had access to other wood, I would not be even messing around with this, because that's the thing about feathering, is that it is fairly material specific. I mean, the important things about feathering are the knife, the skill, and the wood. And the wood is really quite a big one. I think the knife is the least important component. The skill of the user is probably equally important as the material choice. And both of those things obviously sort of come with experience. I mean, you might be able to get some pointers in terms of wood species, but it might not be available in your area. I mean, I can tell you that I normally use white poplar, but they may not have access to that, you know. But something similar would work. A cottonwood or an aspen, you know, is obviously also probably going to work very well. So you can sort of substitute what you have in your area. This is an important aspect of feathering when you're dealing with a knotty piece of wood in general. Oh, and I want to talk about the length of the piece of wood as well. This is very short. This is probably one of the shorter pieces that I would feather. One of the real big mistakes that I see people making a lot of times in videos is trying to feather a piece of wood that is really, really short. I've even seen people, survival instructors, make a video purposefully about feathering wood, and they chose to use a piece of wood that was like about this long. Really, really difficult. If this piece of wood is this long and I'm attempting to come in here and try and hold it somehow to make feather, you just can't get enough purchase on the piece that you're working on to actually feather the wood properly. So it's really important that the piece that you're feathering is long enough. Generally, I think I've heard Mors Kahansky say that elbow to fingertip is about right, and that is generally what I use. So that's important. It's really, really important to have the piece long enough. If you're trying to feather something that's really, really short, you're making it so much more difficult for yourself. Especially if you're not really very experienced with feathering wood, it's not going to work very well. But what I want to say is that it's obvious that using straight-grained, knot-free wood is the best thing to do, but it's not always possible. And say you only have a very short area that you can feather. This is, I don't know, 2, maybe 3 inches from, here to here. And you're still able to get the nice multi-curl feathers. They're sort of smaller and shorter than something like this, but they're still a very thin, densely packed grouping of feathers that you can drop a spark into that it will take flame, because these are the very thin multi-curl feathers that will take flame very easily from a spark. And it's possible, if you develop your skill enough, to do it in shorter. You don't need a big, long stroke to produce really, high number of multi-curl feathers, but you do still need to have a working piece that's long enough. So even though you're only working a small section, the piece can't just be that long. It really just can't be. But the reason you might be doing that is because you might say have, you know, a large knot here or something where you're not able to actually start up here and end down here. You've got to just start here, you know, and you've got to make your feathers like that. But it is still possible to get the multi-curl action even though you have a shorter area that you're feathering, so that's another important aspect. I think I used all of these knives now. So, oh, I don't think I used the Battle Mistress, actually. So, we'll see where I should be looking at for this. So, quick word about feathering configuration. I really like the tip down method where the tip of the knife is down. That's what I mean by tip down. And the feathers are kicked off to the right hand side. And when you do all tip down like that, or all tip up, you end up with a really nice densely packed bundle that is actually denser in this way than if you were to do what I discussed earlier, where you're trying to do one tip up, one straight down, one tip down, like you'll hear some people tell you to do. Not only is that very hard on your wrist, I said it's unnecessary because you can very quickly carve something like this that I can light with a firesteel that I can then use this to transfer that into other materials, and I'm not sitting here for half an hour carving giant feather sticks for whatever reason. You know, that is a valid technique in certain scenarios when you need a large number of feather sticks, but those will be thicker feather sticks, not thin feather sticks. It's a different sort of approach that you take when you're doing that. But this way, you get them kicked off to the right side, which will line the curls up on top of each other like this, giving you long curls with maximum amount of surface area, which is good. And if you were to use tip-up technique, which is not my personal preference, but a lot of people like doing it that way, you'll get essentially the same effect on the opposite side, and you'll get nice long multi-curl feathers that will be lined up, and you'll get nice surface area off of it. So either one of those techniques are equally valid as far as I'm concerned. I really wouldn't be doing the alternating technique where you're doing a little bit this way, a little bit this way, a little bit that way. I would totally stay away from that. The other thing I would totally stay away from that I will briefly mention here is this idea that when we make feather sticks, we're going to come in here, we're going to lock our arms straight, and we're going to attempt to move our body instead of moving our arm, and this we're going to do because it's supposedly energy efficient, and I don't know why we're doing that. That is really not something I would do. It does not, I was alluding to this earlier with some of these other techniques where you're going to, hold the knife stationary and pull the wood towards you. Those techniques don't allow you to develop the proper type of feel for working wood and the edge control that it takes and the knife control skills to work wood. Your arm is bent when you do this. It's really, maybe it's a valid thing to try and use an energy efficient technique at a certain point to do this. But if you're a beginner just starting out, it's going to be very difficult for you to do that. So I would really stay away from this alternating technique where you're going to do one curl this way, one curl straight down, and one curl kicked out this way. I'd stay away from doing that, and I'd stay away from trying to lock your arm straight and do all this. If you don't have a lot of experience doing feathering, stay away from both of those things. Put all of your curls on top of each other like this, and then drop a spark into that and see if you're not happy with the results that you got there, and you'll do it in a much quicker period of time. That's easier on your wrist than if you're trying to manipulate different things. Yeah. The one thing I wouldn't recommend doing, though, also is this, like I said, I consider the tip up or the tip down to be equally valid techniques, but when you start to do straight down curls and you curl everything up into itself, you don't get that surface area. Like I was saying, it's just you don't get the same length of curl, even though you might have the same thinness of material and the same number of curls. They're just curled all up into a little ball, basically, and it doesn't help you at all. You need this surface area once you get to the stage where you're lighting them with the fire steel. So, yeah, that's a bunch of knives. All of them basically equally capable as far as I'm concerned. Even these large knives, both these knives are 5/16 of an inch thick. Oh, I want to talk about the grind on this. It's a full flat grind, 5/16 of an inch thick, with a secondary bevel on it. So, a lot of different types of grinds, 2 different species of wood, both of them usually fairly easy to feather. This one I was having a lot of trouble with, but just sort of one of the things I've been meaning to do for a long time was to sort of bring out some of my knives and do a comparison of the grinds and the way they feather, which I don't really think is very significant. There's not really that much of a significant difference. It might take you a little bit of time to adjust between one type of grind or another, but it's not really a big deal. So, the single strike of the fire steel, and they're off. So, I guess when I do these demonstrations, you don't really get a very good idea of the way I might use feather sticks when I was actually lighting a fire. Because, oh, actually, one of the things I do want to talk about that I didn't is taking them off. Well, first of all, I want to talk about them falling off, or you cutting them off by accident when you're making them. Happens all the time, happens to people like me who have a lot of experience feathering wood. Happens maybe a lot more often when you're just starting out, but it is something that happens, and don't worry about it. Generally, you know, if you have a bunch of loose shavings around, as long as they're you know, properly thin and curly and everything, they'll work for you. I guess I prefer to take them off so that I'm not necessarily wasting the resource of a piece of wood that happens to be feathering very well for me, so I can take them off so they don't have to burn that resource. But it can also make it easier to light them with a fire steel to burn them, to take them off. So that's just part of it. But what I would recommend, though, and as you develop your skill, you'll find that it makes it easier for you when you are lighting them with the fire steel, is to leave them on, carve them all, like I said before, to one side or the other. Carve them all in one direction, giving yourself the densest possible bundle, because there will be no gaps where you were shoving feathers off to the other side, because you won't even get this dense of a bundle if you do that alternating technique. But you shove them all off to one side, leave them on the stick, carve all of them at once, and then take them off, and when you do that, you will get a bundle that will stay together even though it's off the stick, rather than carving them, carving them and taking them off the stick as you carve them, or something like that, which, again, like I said, the loose shavings will work, but as you develop your skill and your experience, you might find that it's easier to light them once they're held together in some way, rather than just they're held in a densely packed fashion on their own without you having to do anything to manipulate them to get them that way, because you weren't able to keep them on on the stick when you were carving them. But like I said, though, also, that is just something that develops over time with experience. Don't worry if you're not able to do that right away. It's not really a huge deal. So... more of this Bravo 1 action. Alright, that's it. That's all I gotta say. Some tips, tricks, and techniques in feathering wood for lighting with the fire steel.